She stood at the window, leaning lightly on the sill. Her gaze was thoughtful and a little detached. Her figure seemed fragile and slender in this soft morning light, which broke through the gray-pink clouds. The rays of the sun barely touched her face, illuminating only the ends of her dark hair, pulled back into a neat bun. Her eyes, large and deep, reflected not only this room, but also something more distant, incomprehensible. The clothes she was wearing, a simple but elegant dress of a muted gray-blue hue, emphasized her taste for minimalism, for comfort, for restraint. She had always been someone who preferred order and precision, and this suitcase, packed with such care, was a reflection of her. At first glance, everything was in its place. Every item in her life seemed carefully thought out and laid out on shelves, like her thoughts about the upcoming trip. But there was something more behind this. It was as if an unbearable wind of emptiness had been rustling in her soul for a long time, which could not be quenched either by work or by the usual routine. Every day of her life was clear and predictable, but something inside screamed for change, for a new spark that had been missing lately. Her husband, sitting at the kitchen table, was the picture of stability. He slowly turned the pages of the newspaper, his short cropped hair barely touched by gray. He was always like this, self-possessed, calm, reliable. His gaze rarely betrayed his emotions, and this was his main difference from her. His presence in the house was felt as an unchanging background, something constant, like the sound of a clock on the wall, which you get used to and stop noticing. They lived together for many years, sharing everyday life and moments, sometimes warm, sometimes cool, but always routine. Their life had long since settled into a comfortable groove where everyone knew their role. She loved him. Of course, there was no doubt about it. But this love became quiet, muted, like a lamp that has been glowing for many years, whose flame gradually weakens. There was a worry lurking in the depths of her heart. Maybe this is not enough. The thought itself was insidious and unusual, like a random thorn that she discovered in her mind more and more often. Looking at the suitcase, she couldn't help but think that this trip was her chance not only to prove something at work, but also to find something lost in herself. Perhaps, away from home, she will again feel that passion for life that she has not felt for a long time. "Are you sure you took everything you needed?" he asked, without taking his eyes off the rustling pages of the newspaper. His voice sounded muffled and indifferent, as if the question was simply part of the everyday routine. In the corner of the living room, the light of a floor lamp softly illuminated his stern profile, barely touching his dark hair. "Yes, everything is in place," she answered, already standing at the table. Her gaze slid over the phone screen, on which new notifications from colleagues flashed. Her fingers hovered briefly on the display before she casually scrolled through the messages. There was silence in the room, only the sound of the page she turned over broke it for a moment. He was a good husband, caring, reliable, faithful. For all the years that they were together, he was always there, supporting in difficult moments, resolving issues that seemed insoluble. But in recent years, it's as if an invisible wall has stretched between them, slowly but steadily increasing the distance. No open conflicts, no shouting or quarreling, just a distance that seemed inevitable. Their conversations increasingly boiled down to dry discussions of work matters, weekend plans, or household concerns. Those nights when they could talk for hours about everything in the world are long gone. The passion that once filled them has faded, leaving behind only quiet affection and habit. They both knew about it, but neither dared to speak up, afraid to admit the truth and face the consequences. When he came to hug her before leaving for the airport, his steps were quiet, almost cautious, as if he did not want to break the silence that enveloped them. She felt his warmth, the warmth that had once given her a sense of security and peace. But now it was the warmth of habit, not passion, not the spark that had previously kindled desire in her. He hugged her carefully, his hands sliding along her back, gently squeezing her shoulders. She sighed, catching the familiar scent of his cologne, which no longer evoked the emotions that once made her heart beat faster. "Call me when you land," he said quietly, barely touching her hair. His voice was calm, warm, but it did not contain the anxiety that she had once felt in such moments. His fingers lingered on the back of her head for a moment, as if he wanted to say something else but changed his mind. "Of course," she answered, smiling tightly. The smile came out correct, familiar, but her eyes remained empty, without sparkle. She took a step back, breaking their short hug, and, adjusting her bag on her shoulder, took the phone in her hand. Another quick glance at the screen, as if that could distract her from the weight of the moment. They looked at each other one last time, as if something important was left unsaid. There was a feeling in the air of lost time, of something that could never be returned. As the plane took off, she looked out the window, watching the city getting smaller below her. Her thoughts wandered. It was just a business trip, a short trip of a few days. But somehow she felt that this trip could become something more, as if something was about to happen. She didn't know what, but a feeling was in the air. Italy beckoned her with its promise of change. The city she saw in the pictures came to life in her imagination. She already imagined the narrow streets, the smell of fresh coffee, the aromas of flowers and sun. All this seemed so far from her ordinary life, from her home, from her husband. Maybe this trip is a chance to rethink everything. A thought flashed. She immediately drove it away, but the feeling of inner dissatisfaction did not let go. Day 1, evening, Italy. She walked out of the airport and took a deep breath. The air in Italy was different, soft and warm, filled with the aromas of spring flowers and the tart smell of earth. Her taxi moved smoothly along the winding streets, and picturesque buildings with tiled roofs and ancient balconies flashed outside the windows. The closer they got to the hotel, the more she felt her excitement growing. Not from the work for which she came here, but from the new things that could await her within these ancient walls. The hotel where she was to stay was small and cozy, surrounded by greenery. She went up to her room, where she was greeted by high windows overlooking the city square and a cozy bed with snow-white linens. Taking off her shoes and looking around a little, she felt the fatigue from the long flight begin to set in. But she didn't want to rest. The city was calling her to the street, and the quiet whisper of its ancient walls seemed inevitable. She decided that before going to bed, she should go out for dinner and immerse herself in the atmosphere of real Italy. Quickly changing into a light dress, she let her hair down and headed to the restaurant that the hotel bartender recommended to her, a place where locals meet over a glass of wine and discuss the latest news. Dim street lights illuminated the cobblestone street as she entered the restaurant. It was quiet inside, the atmosphere was cozy, with a light aroma of freshly prepared pasta and spices. Small tables, candles, old wooden chairs, the place was almost deserted, perfect for enjoying dinner alone. She sat down at a table by the window and ordered a glass of red wine. Lost in her thoughts, she looked at the local customers. A couple at the next table were quietly arguing about something. The bartender was wiping glasses. A couple of friends were noisily discussing football. Everything seemed so far from her ordinary life. But suddenly someone else attracted her attention. The man was sitting at a table in the far corner, half lit by the soft light of a candle. His gaze was focused on her. She tried to ignore it, took a sip of wine and turned away. But something in this man, in his motionless and at the same time persistent gaze, did not let her go. After a moment, he stood up and walked towards her desk. She felt her heart stop for a second and then beat faster. Buonasera, his voice was low and deep, with a slight Italian accent. "I noticed that you are alone here. May I sit down?" She hesitated for a moment, but something in his confidence made her nod. "Of course, have a seat," she replied, feeling her own voice tremble slightly. She didn't know what exactly made her agree, but she had a feeling that this moment would change something important. He sat down opposite her, and they started talking. The conversation was casual. They discussed the city, food, simple things. But with every word, she felt his presence capturing her attention more and more. His silver eyes seemed to penetrate straight into her soul, leaving her defenseless and open. She noticed her hand nervously fiddling with the napkin and tried to pull herself together. This man was strangely attractive. The unusual flirtation, the slight mystery in his words and gestures evoked long-forgotten feelings in her. In his company, she felt welcome again, as if her youth and passion had returned, throwing off the shackles of everyday life. You do understand that there are no accidents, he suddenly said, not taking his eyes off her. She didn't know what to answer. This evening, his presence, the way he spoke to her, seemed like a strange trick of fate that she could not explain. She smiled, trying to hide her confusion. You're right, just enjoy the moment, he added, raising the glass to his lips. She tried to convince herself that this was just a chance meeting, just a fleeting flirtation, but something awakened inside. A quiet voice in her head whispered that this stranger could give her what she had been missing in recent years. She felt her mind and heart begin to fight each other. When they finally said goodbye at the exit of the restaurant, his farewell smile remained in her memory for a long time. Tomorrow was a new day, but she already knew that their meeting would continue. Day 2, morning, Italy. She woke up early. The sun's rays penetrate through the blinds, and there was a slight coolness in the room. Memories of last night gradually surfaced in her mind. She remembered the silver eyes of that stranger, his confident gaze that penetrated deeper than she would like to admit. She bit her lip, remembering how she couldn't resist this short but passionate flirtation. It was just innocent fun, she convinced herself, pulling on a light robe. But somewhere deep inside she knew there was more to it. This man awakened something in her that had long been hidden behind the walls of her daily life. She remembered her husband, their many years together, their comfort and stability. It all seemed so familiar, but something inside her yearned for a new experience, something that reminded her that she was still alive, desired. Her phone vibrated. It was a message from my husband. How are you? How was your evening? She stared at the screen for a long time before typing her answer. Everything is good. Visited a small bar and met a few locals. It was nice to see the real Italy, away from the tourists. She didn't mention that man. It was too personal. In the evening, she again found herself in the same bar. Maybe it was an accident, or maybe it was a decision that she made in the morning as soon as she woke up. Deep down, she knew that she was returning here not only for the atmosphere and delicious wine. He was there. I was sitting in the same place as yesterday. A subtle smile flashed across his face when he noticed her. She felt her insides tighten with nervous anticipation. She sat down at the counter, not so close that it was too obvious, but close enough that he could see her. The bartender offered her a glass of wine, which she accepted, trying to act casual. A few minutes later, he approached her. His voice was low, with a slight accent that added to the mystery. Buonasera, can I treat you to wine? He asked with a soft smile. She froze for a moment, then nodded. Why not? They talked about a lot and nothing. Time passed, and she felt herself succumbing to his magnetism. Their flirting became more open, and with each passing moment the boundary she set seemed more and more blurred. When the bar began to close, he offered to take her to the hotel. She knew that she had to refuse, that this was the very moment when she could still stop. But instead she agreed. Day 3, morning, Italy. When she woke up, the sun was already high above the horizon, breaking through the curtains. The room was quiet. She lay there, listening to the sound of her breathing, her heart beating a little faster than usual. Memories of last night came back. They were clear and disturbing. They stopped at the entrance to her hotel. She looked at him, realizing that she was on the edge of a cliff, and took a step forward. There was a moment of silence, then their lips met. But nothing happened beyond that. She stopped him, apologizing and saying she had to go. He nodded respectfully, giving her one last smile, and left, leaving her on the threshold of the hotel with confused thoughts and a heart beating faster than she could have imagined. Now, lying in bed, she tried to sort everything out. Was this cheating? A kiss, even if it didn't go any further, could it be considered cheating? How many times in her thoughts did she tell herself that this was just an innocent game, a minor adventure to feel alive and desired again? But did something change inside her with this kiss? Her phone vibrated again, interrupting her train of thought. It was a message from my husband. Good morning. How are you today? I hope the trip continues well. I miss you. We haven't spent time together as much as we would like for a long time. Yesterday, I was thinking about you and how much you like Italy. She held her breath as she read his words. Does she miss him? Of course she loved him, but over the last few years their relationship had become more routine. She couldn't help but notice the emptiness that filled their days, consuming the passion and interest that once existed between them. She typed a short answer. Good morning. Everything is fine, although I'm a little tired after yesterday. It's wonderful in Italy, as always. I miss you too. She didn't mention what happened. For what? It didn't mean anything. Or did it mean? Day 3, evening, Italy. All day she wandered around the city in an attempt to distract herself from yesterday. She explored the narrow streets, enjoyed the aromas of coffee and fresh pastries, and listened to the Italian speech around her. But nothing could dislodge thoughts about him from her head about that stranger, whose touch she still felt on her lips. In the evening, as if according to an inevitable scenario, her feet again led her to that very bar. When she entered, her heart began to beat wildly. He was there, in the same place, sitting as if he was waiting for her. Her mind was telling her to leave, that this was a bad idea, that she was playing with fire. But her body moved on its own, drawn to him like a magnet. He looked up as she came closer, and a soft smile lit up his face. You're back, he said with a note of satisfaction in his voice. She nodded, at a loss for words. Her inner world was divided. Part of her wanted to stay, to lose herself in this feeling of danger and excitement. The other part screamed that this was wrong, that she was making a mistake. They ordered wine and sat down at a table in the corner, away from prying eyes. Their conversations were light, but the atmosphere between them was tense. She felt that he already knew that she would not leave that evening. His gaze was confident, full of promises that she was ready to accept. At some point, he leaned closer to her and whispered, Why are you fighting with yourself? You can allow yourself a little happiness, a little pleasure. It's not a sin. Her heart sank. These words cut through her like a blade. He was right. She wanted this. She wanted something that would make her feel life and passion again. She closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, then, without opening them, whispered, Let's go. Day 4, morning, Italy. She woke up feeling like the world had turned upside down. The warmth of the sun's rays penetrated the curtains, touching her face, but it was cold inside. Everything that had happened the day before flashed before my eyes like scenes from a movie too real to be ignored. The room was empty. That man, his smile, his touch, all this seemed to be in the past, although in fact it happened only a few hours ago. She sat on the edge of the bed, her feet dangling on the cool wooden floor, and felt a wave of doubt wash over her thoughts. It wasn't just flirting, it wasn't just a kiss. They spent the night together, and now she had to face reality. Her phone vibrated on the nightstand. Message from my husband. How are you? When can we talk? She closed her eyes, her fingers running nervously across the screen. What could she tell him? Should I confess what happened? This would be the end of their marriage. Or try to forget, convincing yourself that everything can be fixed if you just don't think about it. She couldn't answer right away. She needed to think. Her mind was in chaos, her heart was beating faster than usual. Yesterday evening and night seemed contradictory on the one hand. It was the passion that she dreamed of on the other, the betrayal that she was afraid of. She got up, went to the window, and opened it. The view of the ancient streets of Italy was magnificent, but her inner world was full of uncertainty. She took a deep breath of the fresh morning air, trying to calm the storm inside. Day 4, Italy. She spent the whole day alone. She walked around the city, sat in a cafe, enjoying coffee, and tried to find answers to questions that haunted her. Everything she did seemed to be an attempt to escape reality, but this reality was too insistent. The man with whom she spent the night did not leave her thoughts, but she was even more tormented by the thought that she had done this behind her husband's back. As the day drew to a close, she finally made up her mind. A choice had to be made: either live with this secret or tell my husband the truth. She knew that she could no longer hide the fact that their relationship had reached an impasse. Perhaps this affair was only a signal that their marriage could no longer exist as before. Day 4, evening, Italy. She returned to her room, feeling empty. Her suitcase was still in the corner of the room, a reminder that it was time to go home. But will she return to her old life? Her phone vibrated again, a message from the very man with whom she spent the night. Thinking about you. Hope you're okay. She looked at the screen for a long time before answering. Thanks for last night, but I don't think I can continue this. I need to sort myself out. She sent the message and sat on the bed. Perhaps it was the right move to put an end to this story before it went too far. Day 5, morning, Italy. She woke up early, feeling heavy at heart. The Italian morning was beautiful as always: sun, light breeze, noise of city streets, but chaos reigned inside her. She looked at the suitcase ready to leave and realized that this trip had changed her. But has she changed anything in her life? She ran her fingers over her phone, checking her husband's messages again. His kindness, sincerity, the usual words of care in every message now seemed suffocating to her. How could she return home as if nothing had happened? As if she had not crossed the line that she had been trying not to cross for so long. Good morning, how are you? Home soon. A message from my husband popped up on the screen. It was simple, familiar, but it made her heart clench painfully. She typed an answer, but her fingers froze over the screen. Tell the truth. Tell me everything that happened, or just send another standard message, leaving out the main thing. Her mind raced between these two options. She knew that the truth could destroy everything they had built over the years, but lies. Lies were also destructive. Every time she looked into his eyes, her own thoughts would poison their future. But telling the truth meant admitting betrayal. Day 5, day, airport. She stood at the front desk, still not sending a message. The line moved slowly, and each step towards the counter seemed to her to be closer to the inevitable, to returning home, where the truth was waiting for her. The plane was just the first step that would lead her back to the life she knew. But will it be the same life? She sat down to wait for the flight, and her thoughts returned to last night. The man she spent the night with was still in her mind, but not as a real person, but as a symbol of what she wanted: freedom from routine, predictable life. Maybe this was exactly what she needed to realize, that her marriage had long since become something dead. But now she was faced with a choice: fight for her future with her husband, knowing that the relationship might never be the same, or continue to live with the weight of betrayal that would hang over them. Day 5, evening, plane. She sat by the window and watched the clouds creep under the plane. Thoughts about what to do did not let her go. There was only one choice ahead, a decision she had to make. Her phone vibrated. It was him again, her husband. The words on the screen were so simple and warm that she felt pain. He wrote about how he was waiting for her at home, how they could spend the weekend together, just enjoying each other's company. She couldn't stand it anymore. A decision was brewing inside her, and she knew what she had to do. When the plane landed, she already knew what she would say. She will leave the airport, come home, and as soon as they are alone, she will tell the truth. She will tell him everything, not in order to ease her conscience, but in order not to hide behind a lie. She didn't know what would happen next. Will he be ready to forgive her, or will they break up? All this was unknown. But one thing she knew for sure was that she couldn't live hiding what had happened from him. Day 6, morning, home. When she entered the house, the usual warmth surrounded her, but something was different. There was a strange feeling in the room, as if something important had happened during her absence here that she did not know about. The husband stood at the threshold, his usual smile on his face, but his gaze. The gaze was slightly tense, somehow distant, as if other thoughts were hiding behind this smile. "You're finally home," he said, coming up to hug her. His hugs were tight, but they felt like duty, like something routine, rather than an expression of genuine joy. He patted her lightly on the back and, pulling away, looked carefully into her eyes. She took a step back, feeling a strange heaviness in her chest. Looking around, she noticed an unfamiliar bottle of perfume on the shelf by the window. It was a new, elegant bottle that she had never seen in the house before. Her heart froze for a moment. She stepped towards the shelf and, casually taking the bottle in her hands, sniffed it. The scent was light, feminine, with hints of jasmine and rose, a scent that had never been her preference. It was one of those that seemed too sweet and attractive for her to use. "Whose are these?" she asked, trying to keep her voice from shaking. She could hardly contain her excitement, trying to come up with a logical explanation. The husband hesitated slightly, his gaze flickered to the bottle for a moment, and then he said, somehow too hastily, "Oh, it was probably your sister who stopped by when you were not there. She left them by accident." Her fingers involuntarily tightened on the lid of the bottle. "Sister?" "Certainly." But his voice, it was not the calm and confident voice that she knew. His tone was unnaturally even, as if he was trying to say it too confidently, but he himself did not believe in his own words. She had known him for many years, and this little gesture of his nervously scratching the back of his head always gave him away when he was not telling something. She looked at him but remained silent. It flashed through her head. Maybe it was just a bottle. Maybe her sister really left it. But intuition, no matter how hard she tried to drown it out, began to whisper the opposite. She suddenly remembered how in recent weeks he began to leave for work earlier and come later, how he refused the usual dinners together, citing fatigue. And now it all began to add up to the whole picture. She knew it wasn't just perfume. As he turned to carry her suitcase into the bedroom, she noticed another detail that she had previously missed. In the kitchen, next to the sink, there was a wine glass. One glass. But not her. She always used her old, simple glasses, but this one was new, elegant, with a subtle pattern around the rim. There were still a few drops of red wine in the glass, as if it had been used recently. Everything was always under control in this house, and he never left things in disarray. Her heart began to beat faster, her thoughts intertwined in chaos. Who drank wine? Why this glass? Why are there other people's perfumes on the shelf? All this began to add up to one thing: he probably had another woman. She took several deep breaths, trying to maintain her composure. An inner voice screamed, demanding answers, demanding confrontation, but she stopped. Her own secret, the night spent with a stranger in Italy, now covered her with renewed vigor. How could she blame him when she did the same thing herself? They both found themselves in this vicious circle, each of them looking for something outside of their relationship. He found his solace here, and she found her in a foreign country. When her husband returned to the living room, she was already standing at the window, looking into the gray autumn sky. He approached, stopping next to her. "Everything is fine." His voice sounded calm, but there was something else in it, a barely noticeable tension. She nodded, but a tight smile played on her lips. Everything was raging inside her, but she made a choice. Her own betrayal was like a thorn in her heart, and she knew that if she started talking about his possible infidelity now, it would ruin everything. "It's okay," she said quietly. "I'm just a little tired from the road." He came closer and, as if suspecting nothing, put his arm around her shoulders. The warmth of his embrace was familiar, but now it felt more like an illusion. Their relationship became a mask behind which secrets were hidden that they were both afraid to reveal. She decided to remain silent, at least for today. She decided not to destroy something that was probably already cracked. She stood in this embrace, feeling her soul being torn apart inside. She didn't know how long she could carry this burden inside her, both her own betrayal and the fact that her husband was probably also with someone else. But perhaps there was something more to this silence. The silence gave her time. Time to think about what will happen next. A couple of days later, he entered the room. His steps were quiet, as if he was afraid to disturb the fragile peace that hung between them. She turned around, and their eyes met. The words they were both afraid to say hung in the air. "We need to talk," he said quietly, breaking the tense silence. She nodded, feeling her stomach tighten. This moment seemed inevitable, too much hidden, too much left unsaid. They sat opposite each other at the kitchen table. The light of the lamp softly illuminated their faces, but instead of comfort, this light only emphasized tension. "Something has changed," he began, avoiding her gaze. "I know you feel it. We've grown distant from each other, and I think we've both gone too far." She froze, his words piercing like needles. Her fears were confirmed. "What are you talking about?" she asked, trying not to show excitement, although everything inside was trembling. "I can't pretend that everything is fine anymore," he sighed, finally looking into her eyes. "I have another woman." She sat silently, feeling the world around her crumbling. But instead of anger or resentment, she felt a strange relief. Everything fell into place. She wasn't the only one looking for a way out. They were both lost. "Me too," she said quietly. "In Italy, I met a man." His eyes widened, and there was a flash of pain in them, but then that expression gave way to understanding. They both walked towards this point, and now that everything was said, the silence between them became a little easier. "So what now?" he asked, not knowing what to do with this new knowledge. She sighed, thinking about what happened in Italy. It wasn't just passion or flirting. It was something more, a signal that her life required changes, that she had long been stuck in a routine and had lost herself. "I don't know," she answered honestly, "but I know one thing. We need to change something. We can't continue to live as if nothing happened." The husband got up, walked around the room, then stopped at the window. He stared into the night for a long time, as if trying to find an answer in the flickering lights of the city. "We've been through a lot together," he finally said, "but it seems we have lost ourselves along the way." She walked up to him and stood next to him, feeling his presence so familiar and at the same time alien. "Perhaps we need some time apart," she said, choosing her words carefully, "to figure out what we really want. Are we together or not?" He nodded, accepting her words. It was painful, but fair. Several weeks have passed since they decided to live separately. He stayed in their house, and she rented a small apartment nearby. It was a strange time. She had to learn to live again without her usual support, without the constant presence of her husband nearby. But along with this came a feeling of relief. She felt herself returning to herself again. She started drawing, something she had wanted to do for a long time, but had put it off. "I started spending more time with friends, traveling on weekends, and just listening to myself." Her life was slowly but surely filled with new meaning. And although she missed the warm moments she had with her husband, she realized that their relationship could no longer be the same. They both changed. One evening, she received a message from him. "Let's meet and talk. I think I'm ready." She agreed. The meeting took place in their favorite cafe. He looked calm, but there was something new in his eyes, understanding, maturity. They ordered coffee, and the silence between them was no longer oppressive. "How are you?" she asked. "Better than expected," he answered with a slight smile. "I thought a lot about us, about what we did for each other. We gave each other everything we could. But now it seems to me that our time together has come to an end. We both deserve happiness, and I realize that we may not be together." She felt something tighten inside her, but it was not pain, but acceptance. He was right. "I thought about that too," she replied. "You were everything to me, and I'm grateful for all the years we spent together. But now I feel like I need something else, and so do you." They sat for a long time, silently looking at each other, and in this look there was everything: gratitude, forgiveness, and freedom. "Thank you," she finally said, getting up from the table, "for everything." "Thank you too," he answered quietly. They hugged goodbye, and this hug was not goodbye, but a blessing for a new life. When she stepped outside, the evening air seemed fresh and filled with new possibilities. Now a different life awaited her, a life that she built herself, with new dreams, goals, and hopes. She understood that many more difficulties awaited her ahead, but the main thing was that she felt free and alive again. And she knew that now her life would begin to move in a new direction, where she would no longer be afraid of change, but, on the contrary, would accept it as part of her path. Returning home, she sat on the sofa, looking out the window. Her phone lay nearby, as if attracting thoughts that she had been pushing away for a long time. Evening was slowly gathering outside, but uncertainty reigned in her soul. The meeting with her husband left her in a calm, but strangely empty state. Everything was resolved, but questions still remained inside. Her thoughts returned to that man from Italy, to his silver eyes, the confidence with which he looked at her, to the moment when their lips met. It was not just a chance meeting. In his presence, she felt different, free, alive, real. She took the phone, opened the chat, and froze. Her last message to him was that she rejected him. She ran her finger across the screen, hesitating. Should she engage in this dialogue again? What does she want from this correspondence? She started typing, not thinking about the consequences. Hello? I returned home, but my life has changed. I was thinking about you, about our meeting. Her fingers paused over the screen. An inner voice screamed that this was not a good idea. But on the other hand, what does she have to lose? Her husband let her go, and this feeling of freedom awakened in her a desire to again feel the spark that she experienced in Italy. She added one more phrase, deciding to be honest. I can't get you out of my head. Another moment of hesitation, then she pressed send. The message has been sent. Everything inside was trembling with anticipation. She didn't know what she wanted, his answer or silence. But the very thought that she took a step towards this man, whom she did not fully know, but who left a mark on her life, made her heart beat faster. Time passed slowly. She clutched the phone in her hands, and every minute of waiting seemed like an eternity. She had already begun to convince herself that perhaps he was no longer interested, that this was all just a moment, a flash that had already faded. But after a few minutes, the phone screen began to flicker. Message. From him. Hi, it's good to hear from you. I can't stop thinking about our meeting either. It was something special. How are you? Her heart began to beat faster. The answer was simple, but behind it was the same chemistry that came to life between them that evening. She couldn't deny it. She typed the answer. I'm fine, but everything has changed. I told my husband about us, that we met. Now we live separately. She understood that a big step was hidden in these words, but she could no longer stop. Something inside her was pushing her to a new stage of life. Perhaps this man was her chance at something new. The answer came almost immediately. I didn't expect it to happen so quickly, but I'm glad you're honest. When we met, I felt like there was something important between us. Do you want to continue this? She held her breath. This question was exactly what she was afraid of and what she was waiting for. Everything about her screamed that she was facing an important choice. She typed a message, feeling the tension reach its peak. I don't know. I want to understand what these feelings are, but I'm afraid of being wrong again. The answer came with tenderness. Take your time. I'm here. We can just talk. Everything else will come by itself. She felt relieved. He did not press, did not force her to make a choice immediately. His words were soft, as was his look when they met in Italy. But now she knew that this conversation would continue. Several days passed, and their correspondence became more and more frank. They shared thoughts, dreams, even doubts. She gradually opened up to him, talking about her fear of the future, that their meeting had turned her usual world upside down. He, in turn, shared his experience, admitting that he, too, had been looking for something more in his life for a long time. And then one evening, when she was sitting by the window with a cup of tea, her phone vibrated. I think we should see each other again. I'll be in Paris next week. Maybe you can fly over. Paris. He suggested meeting in the city, which always symbolized romance and new beginnings for her. Her heart sank in anticipation, but then a feeling of fear came over her. She understood that this meeting could change everything. She looked at the message for a long time, then typed a reply. I'll fly in. On the plane on the way to Paris, she looked out the window, remembering that first evening in Italy. Now her life was taking an uncharted path again, but she felt it was the right decision. She was no longer the woman who got lost in routine and faded away along with her usual life. Now new opportunities were opening up to her, and she was ready to accept them. When she left the airport in Paris, her heart was beating fast. Something new was waiting for her, and although she did not know how it would end, she finally felt free, ready to live for herself, and not for the expectations of others. Now she faced not only a meeting with him, but also with herself, the woman she had found again. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to